Right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for taking some time out of the, well, depending where you are in the world, it could be middle of the afternoon, could be middle of the morning, it could be middle of the evening. This is the world we deal with now. But for us up in North Wales, we have a bit of I'm going to call it a snow day as I look out the window. It's the main roads are okay, but the paths and the everywhere else is a bit snowy. So some people are off work, some people are on reduced hours, some people can work from home. So I just scrambled. Well, in fact, I was trying to organise something else. But the person who I'm joined with today is very busy and doesn't have time normally for idiots like me. But he's given me some time this afternoon, only because he had nothing else to do. So I'm delighted that I'm to be joined by Gab Sutton. Good afternoon, Gab. How are you?
Hi, Matthew. Yeah, it's great to be on. Thanks so much for having me. A real pleasure.
So Gab is, I'm not sure what you call yourself now, blogger, EFL guru. What else do you?
That's better
I
than
don't know what
anything
you
else
are.
I've been
Freelance
called.
journalist. All of the above. What I think does that cover everything?
EFL pundit will go with, I think.
Perfect.
Yeah, any of the above is fine. Yeah.
I'm sure most people who watch this will know who you are, but just in case, just tell us where people can find you from a social media point of view, and give us a quick rundown on what and when people can find. I mean, your X is always live with videos, and you're always streaming. But go on, to give people just a bit of an overview, if that's okay.
Sure. So I basically tweet about the EFL. I tweet a lot of these things that I'd call opinion starters. They're basically at 8 o'clock on weekday mornings, every weekday morning other than Tuesdays, and on sort of at the 10 o'clock on match days or 5 o'clock on match days, just after the game, sort of asking people about how their team has gone, if how the game has gone, if they've been at the game, or these kind of opinion starters where I'll ask you about a certain aspect of your EFL team, and then you can reply in regards to your EFL team. It's a bit complicated to explain if you don't, but that's kind of the stuff that I do, to put it simply. So so that's the kind of stuff that I do, produce content on the EFL. I have a podcast, which the League One version of it is on Thursdays at 7:30. So you can check those out to get lots of guests, lots of fans of different teams. And I also write for different people as well. So a bit of a convoluted answer to your question there, Matthew. But I get up to, that's what I'm up to.
Basically, you can't escape him. You go on TikTok. He's on with some people. You go on social media. He's live
many people have tried, Matthew.
He's on YouTube all the time. So just give us the handle so people can know what they're looking for.
So the handle is Gab Sutton, as you can see on your screen there, for any sort of EFL content.
There you go. And I don't know if the YouTube one doesn't go as that, though. Does it go? Doesn't that go as that?
Yeah, thanks for prompting me on that. Right. So YouTube is need to work on plugging my own stuff, don't I? So the YouTube is EFL Debate, and you can also find that on Spotify. So that's where the podcasts are.
Perfect. Just in case people don't see it live and they want to catch up and stuff is all I was thinking. So today, as this was ad hoc, it became, as Plan B came into operation, we just we threw this together. I just thought it would be interesting to get a neutral's perspective on some of the things that are going on around Wrexham this season, mainly, obviously. Although I'm saying neutral, Gab, but it turns out you have irons in the fire, don't you? Do you disclose which football team you support? I mean,
Yeah,
I
that's
knew
fine.
already, but I don't know I don't know whether you go around telling people really.
Well, do you know what it is, Matthew? So I support Birmingham City, and but the reason I don't kind of like put it on my social medias and that kind of thing is because whenever I say something that's questioning or critical of one team, if my own team's doing badly, it's the immediate response to say, "Yeah, but your
Throw
team's
it
not."
back at you.
And so my way of avoiding that is to kind of not make it a massive thing on my social media. So yeah, but yeah, I don't mind saying it. Yeah, I support Birmingham City. They're the team that I grew up supporting. And actually, Matthew, as we were talking off air, I do remember us facing Wrexham
You
in
had
the
to bring
League
this
Cup
up, didn't
in.
you?
You are?
You had to bring this up, didn't you?
Yeah, well, to be fair, you gave us a good game in the certain, to a certain extent, because I think you took us to extra time. I think Llewellyn might have scored the first goal that night.
3-1 or something in the end. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it was 4-1
Oh,
in
there you
extra
go. Yeah, yeah.
time. But yeah, you gave good account of yourselves that night. But thankfully, in a slightly different financial off-field position than
Yes.
maybe you were 16 years ago.
Although that didn't help us earlier in this season, but maybe we'll touch on that depending on the time that you got to go. So, I'm going to call you a neutral anyway. I'm going to obviously, even though you have got you have got this race in League One, but from a neutral perspective, obviously you'll have seen a little bit of noise as Wrexham have sort of progressed out of National League and then managed to bounce up again last season. I was just wondering what at the start of this season, when you sat down and you start to analyse and look ahead at the season, what you expected from Wrexham. Although obviously, it's always hard to predict, isn't it? But I'm just wondering whether you sort of expected them to be where they are now in reality.
Sure. Honest answer, probably not. I'm when Wrexham, I think Wrexham are one of the bookmakers' sort of favourites for promotion from League One, and I was actually a little bit sceptical of that
Yeah,
because I think it's a new level. I think when you've just won back-to-back promotions, excuse me, what you're probably looking for is to try and find a home at that level.
yeah.
Maybe a little bit before you start to kind of look a bit higher up. At the same time, I know Wrexham happen to be quite a wealthy club, and you've got very ambitious owners and all the rest of it. So I knew you wouldn't be in any danger of relegation. A little bit surprised at how quickly you've been able to be competitive in League One. I think one factor has been that League One, as a general division, hasn't quite been as strong as it looked to me on paper before the campaign. I don't know if that's kind of borne out. I'd be interested to know, actually, Matthew, as a fan, has League One been a little bit weaker than maybe you might have expected before going into the campaign?
Yeah, well, so when we do, I didn't sit there and do one of those, where people predict every single position. I
Yeah,
didn't do that. We on the podcast we just predicted who might get relegated in whatever order, and
sure.
who might be in the promotion playoffs in whatever order.
Hmm.
And I actually didn't think Wrexham would be in the playoffs this season. I thought we would fall outside of that, partly because I expected us to meet this seasoned and hardened League One teams,
Hmm.
as well as the falling Championship sides.
Yeah.
So I thought and I still believe that when it comes down to it in the mix, that's where Wrexham will just fall short, in my opinion. Obviously, I'd love us to get promoted or get in the mix for it, Gab, but I think you just have to be realistic and respectful. I've said this on your podcast. You just have to be respectful to the teams that are already there as well, don't you? So yeah, I agree with what you've said. However, I'm of the belief, and I keep saying this, and I'd be interested in your thoughts. Post Christmas, as we get sort of into the new year, I think those 3 or 4 teams, of which Birmingham, Huddersfield, Bolton, there's probably another one that I'm thinking of. I think those boys will slowly rise to the top, and then they'll go, and they'll start to string wins together of 3, 4, 5 on the trot. Whereas at the moment, some of them, Bolton, for instance, are a bit one step forward, 2 steps back, aren't they? But
Yeah.
I think they'll sort themselves out, Gab. That
Mm.
was my. I don't know what you feel about that.
No, I agree with that. I think there's lots of teams that I think if you look just above the relegation zone in League One, there's lots of sides that are in positions that are lower than what I expected. So, for instance, I thought Blackpool had comfortably a top 10 squad going into the season. They've massively underperformed. Arguably the same with Rotherham, Wigan, very talented
Yeah.
squad. So I think there's lots of teams that we were kind of expecting a little bit more from, and that's kind of what's made it a really open and enjoyable league as well. Because other than I like to think my own team have probably got what it takes to pull clear potentially, because just the resources that we've got are a little bit different to much of the league. But I think other than that, I think there's lots of games where you could see a team that's 19th beating a team that's third or fourth. And I think that's what makes it a really exciting league. And that's what I'm absolutely buzzing for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I think there might be other stories like Wycombe's climbed to the top at the moment. I think we might see a little bit more of that as teams climb in and out the
Yeah,
playoffs that perhaps surprise us, because at the moment that level is well, you'd know better than me, but it isn't as being as dominated by those big teams currently.
sure.
Um, but from the outside, Gab, obviously you've got your own superstars at Birmingham. This Wrexham squad, which is depleted by injury currently, there's the old caveat: get the excuses in early. But what are you sort of making of it at the moment? And perhaps over the summer, what was there anybody that perhaps Wrexham did bring in, and you thought, oh, that's useful?
George Dobson,
Yeah.
100%. I've been a massive admirer of George Dobson's, going back to his Warsaw days. I'm a little bit surprised he hasn't, quote unquote, made it higher up the pyramid, because I felt like the range of quality. I've probably watched George Dobson play 5 or 6 times live in his career, and it almost feels as if each time there's something different that he's brought to the game. Like, I've watched him play for Charlton, and he brings that real grit and destructive element at the base of
Yeah.
midfield. I've watched him play for Walsall earlier in his career, and he did a really good pressing role. Another game for Walsall, he was, very neat feet in tight areas and kind of looked after the ball really well. Just that range of qualities that I absolutely love to see in a midfielder. And I think he's a championship footballer. I do. And I think that for Wrexham to get it, I think that was probably one of your best signings of the season. I'd be really interested to hear whether you hold the same depth of feeling for George Dobson.
Yeah, he's my favourite player this season, Gab, if I'm honest. I believe the story of him coming to us went something like this. I think at the time we were trying to sign Matty James, who we've now obviously got as a free agent. For whatever reason, that we couldn't close that deal as quickly as perhaps Phil wanted to. And I think Dobbo ended up with that move to Hungary fell apart, or he got let
Yeah.
out of his contract. I've never been quite sure exactly where they were legally with that, but anyway, he was able to leave Hungary, whatever happened, and I believe he texted Phil Parkinson and probably a couple of others and said any chance of anything going, and I believe they sorted that move out within a day. I
Right.
suppose Parky couldn't believe his luck, I imagine. When
Yeah.
you've got somebody like that saying I'm sign on a free, what do you want? So he's been my favourite player this year. He's too often we ask too much of him in midfield. I think we ask him to, against middle to bottom table teams, he can win the game on his own. He can destroy that midfield, but he needs some help against the bigger sides, and we saw that a little bit on Saturday against Stockport. So I've mentioned his name in Phil Parkinson.
Sure.
I think after a loss, you can imagine the meltdown that goes on, and you see it because you follow so many different fans. You can imagine the types of things that get said after any loss. We live in a world now where as soon as you lose a game, it's like the end of the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know what it's like. So whilst Rob and Ryan are extremely happy and have come out publicly today actually and said that they'll back Parky in January, as you'd expect, I'm interested in what your sort of opinion on Phil Parkinson was. Be careful what you say, obviously, because he has how can I word this? He's got a unique way of playing football that perhaps can be effective, but perhaps can be limiting in other ways. You can see
Sure.
why I'm stumbling on my words here, Gab, can't you?
Yeah, I think I've stumbled on my words with Phil Parkinson a little bit as well, because I think one I think anyone that's got his record, I don't care what resources you're working with,
Yeah,
his record as Wrexham manager is absolutely outstanding. And I do have to give him his due for that because, you win back-to-back promotions and you have a team third in League One. That's pretty impressive work, isn't it? I don't think anyone can really argue with that. I think at the same time, there's part of me that looks at Wrexham the way they've absolutely annihilated teams at home,
yeah,
and possibly away from home. It's felt a little bit conservative, perhaps,
yeah,
and maybe you had more quality that would allow you to impose yourselves on teams a little bit more
yeah.
than perhaps you have so far this season away from home.
Totally agree.
And I'm also mindful that although as much as his record is absolutely phenomenal as manager, and I really want to make sure that that's given its due, there is an element to which I've looked at Wrexham even last season and felt like it's not like you would kind of dominate opponents in a 90-minute performance. It's that there was this kind of constant feeling that whenever the minute Wrexham got into the final third, they could just cut teams open with this incredible individual quality that you had, whilst being pretty well drilled and well organised. And I will give Parkinson credit for that.
Yeah,
But it felt quite individual quality related, and I don't want to use that as a stick to beat Parkinson with, because it's not his fault that Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney are Wrexham's owners, and that you have got the resources to
yeah,
buy these proven goal scorers like Paul Mullin, and sign proven centre forwards like Stephen Fletcher, and
yeah. I get it.
and also he's developed players as well. Like Ryan Barnett stepped up more than we would have expected. Max Cleworth stepped up more than we would have expected. So I think it's important to have some balance to that as well. But there is that feeling for me away from home where could you impose yourselves a little bit more?
Yeah, that's the frustrating thing for me. I went to Stockport on Saturday, and saw what I wrote as it was a pretty typical Wrexham performance. Really, we're looking for moments where we can hurt people rather than just looking to go out and try and dominate larger sections of the game. And when you don't have the quality in those moments, it what you see in front of you is not pretty, and it looks schoolboyish, is that's the concern. So no, everybody really loves Phil Parkinson. Everybody wants to buy him drinks. Everybody wants to build him a statue, all that type of stuff. But everybody also wants to give him a shake and go, can we just tweak this a little bit, Phil? And let's what can we do just to shake this up? Because that away record is, obviously you haven't got it in front of you, but it's not the best, and it is reflective of the performances. Unfortunately, the exception of probably that Birmingham away game was too big for us so early in the season.
Sure.
I think you stepped your game up in that game. Obviously, all the hype and just showed what you were capable of. Obviously, you can't maintain that probably every game, but there was that.
Yeah.
Sheffield United, we were never going to win. Well, I say never. We were unlikely to win that in the cup early on.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the other performances have, they've left room for improvement.
Yeah.
Is what I will say. So you touched on some of the youngsters. Max Cleworth, Ryan Barnett.
Will we still call Ryan Barnett a youngster?
Why is he? What is he? Young? He's mid-20s. Then is he?
I would have thought he would be. Yeah, I thought he would be mid-20s.
Well, he's very baby faced. I don't know if you've seen a photo of him.
Okay.
He's very baby faced. Let's say we'll say we've touched on some of the.
I think maybe he is a youngster by contrast of your.
Yeah, I guess. When you're talking about James McLean and Stephen Fletcher, etc.
Yeah.
But Max Cleworth and Ryan Barnett have probably been two of the 3 or 4, depending on the type of player that you like, sort of standouts for us this season. I know you and Bryn's Barn, I think it is, who speak regularly about Wrexham. I know he would have given you bits of, he would have replied to you on social media about those boys. But what have you, from the outside, what have you kind of made of them two and their impact?
So Ryan Barnett and Max Cleworth.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, well, I can see that with the way that Wrexham play, the wing backs are going to be really important. So it feels like you want a couple of midfielders to really keep a lid on the central areas, and you got your wing backs given pretty much free rein to stay high and wide and get crosses in for your centre forwards. And you kind of, for central creativity, you seem to be relying quite heavily on Elliot Lee. But I think with Ryan Barnett, what really excites me is just that kind of unpredictability that he brings, and he's such an exciting footballer, and he takes people on. So I love that about Ryan Barnett. And then with Max Cleworth, I'm just so impressed with how he stepped up, because I remember looking at the squad. With I think I had Nathan Salter on the podcast, and we were kind of looking at the squad, and it felt like Max Cleworth was going to be loaned out in the League Two season, because you had at the time, what was it, Ben Tozer, Will Boyle,
Hayden probably.
exactly,
Yeah,
yes. So
yeah,
many centre. I think there were about five really good centre halves that were sort of in the mix, and we're thinking surely he's going to be loaned out. And so the fact that there were a few injuries that probably played into his favour, but I think that made a massive difference in terms of. How he was able to kind of come into the team, and he really seemed to grab his opportunity. um, and I think it's quite important, Matthew, that while Wrexham are able to afford players that have that kind of proven quality, that you do have that bit of youth, that bit of exuberance, that kind of dynamism that you
yeah.
get from players who are maybe a bit more up and coming, who are kind of hungry to prove themselves. And I do think the likes of Max Cleworth and Ryan Barnett seem to give you that balance.
Yeah, I think this season I was worried. The names we were getting linked with in the summer were all your journeyman pros,
Mm.
and I was concerned. It turned out that pretty much every signing was the opposite. So obviously we brought in Lewis Brunt, who was obviously
Mm.
at Mansfield. Obviously Mo Fowl came late. We took, as a free agent, we took Josh Adam, who'd been at the Man City Academy. We've integrated Harry Ashfield and Aaron James, so a midfielder and a young defender who are training with the first team regularly. So I'm as you say, you do need that, don't you? And I'm pleased that those players are in and around it, even though they're only playing in like the Bristol Street Motors, etc. At the moment. They'll obviously be they'll be raising their level, won't they, in training,
Mm.
off training with the likes of the experienced pros like Fletcher et al. So I agree. I think that's sort of really really important. Um, let's look ahead a little bit. I'm conscious of your time as well. Let's look ahead a little bit. How do you think this league's going to shake up over Christmas, Gab? What's your thoughts? Who do you like? Can Wickham stay there? Is there somebody
Mm.
like Lincoln going to make a jump? What do you think?
Wow, what a great question. I've got the table in
Now and
front of
again,
me.
I do have them. They come. They're irregular, but they do come now and again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty confident that my own team are going to take the league title, and ultimately, I hope perhaps pull a little bit away from the rest. I think we have got the resources to do that. So I do think that it's going to be a bit of a race for second. Who that's going to be? Obviously, you look at Wickham. They lost at your lot on the opening day, and then they lost on week 2. But since then, 32 points from 12 games is a phenomenal record, isn't it? So I think they're in astonishing form under Matt Bloomfield. So at the moment, you'd say they're in the driving seat. I think there's possibly question marks about them and all the teams, even in the playoffs, because while last season you had very much sides like Bolton, like Barnsley, who kind of at Peterborough, who had this sort of recent history of being up there that you could sort of really trust, if you like. That's maybe less the case this year. It's a little bit more complex, and you don't quite know who's which are the real deals and which are the teams that might be likely to drop off. So again, that creates a lot of room for a late runner. For instance, Peterborough have got a phenomenal footballer on the right wing in Kwame Poku, 15 direct goal involvements this season, and they're such a talented side, but they're also very leaky at the back. But I'm also wondering whether in this season in particular, whether they might be able to get away with some of those defensive deficiencies because they are so good going forward, and because the standard of the league isn't what it maybe was 2 or 3 years ago, in my opinion. So I would look at a side like Lincoln City. I think they were actually better, arguably, last season. I think they're very efficient this season. I think they're very solid defensively. But I think last season they were maybe a better footballing side. Stockport County new to the league, and so are yourselves. So really excited to see whether your lot can keep it up. But I think you've got a chance because of the resources. In your case, both and in Stockport's. Having seen Mansfield, I could see them dropping off, but then I think Bolton Wanderers and Huddersfield will come into that top six. Reading, are they going to get their ownership situation sorted?
Yeah.
Charlton probably need a bit more creativity in midfield. They're strong enough defensively. They've got some good options at top. So yeah, again are one of those underachievers like Wigan, Blackpool, and Rotherham that I mentioned earlier. They're just above the relegation zone. Could they, put a run together? I even think Leyton Orient in 20th. They're just above the drop zone, but in terms of how they've played, I actually don't think they're far off. So I think it's just a beautifully unpredictable league where there's question marks over some of the teams towards the top. There's reasons to believe in some of the teams towards the bottom. And I think what that's going to create is just absolute chaos where you don't know what's going to happen from one week to the next. And I'm looking forward to it, that's for sure.
I've got a few more. Have you got time for a few more questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for
I won't be too long because I know your
don't worry.
time is precious. Obviously, us and Mansfield have managed to be in the mix up there at the moment. That's not to say that's where we're going to finish. Has that surprised you? Just with you talking about Mansfield, Mansfield came to Wrexham the other day and were really, really good at our place. They deserved at least a draw, probably edged it. In all honesty, and that was as good as one of the best sides I've seen at the Racecourse. But obviously, that could have been a one-off, can't it? That's the thing. So I've just wondered if that had surprised you, the new boys being up there or not.
I would say it's really surprised me how well Mansfield have done, because I was actually quite sceptical about Mansfield going into the season because of their recruitment policy is very much led towards experience and led towards versatility. So Clough likes to work with a smaller squad, but he likes players who can cover lots of different positions. And I think that can sometimes compromise you in terms of having the best players for the best positions if you're sort of prioritising players who can be sort of chameleons, if you like. But actually that's worked out quite well for them. So I've kind of got to give them their due for that. And signings like Lee Gregory that I wasn't necessarily sure about in the summer have actually worked really well for them.
He was brilliant against us.
Yeah.
He was absolutely brilliant. Him and Will Evans were excellent, but you could see him leading the line. Honestly, he was our back line struggled with him to start with. They didn't, that class.
I thought exactly the same when I saw Mansfield at Northampton back in September, because for me, Lee Gregory never stopped running. He's 35, but you really wouldn't have thought it based on his work ethic. So, those two are a real handful. So, all credit to Mansfield.
Yeah, just the final thing on that. When Keller Dunn left, which might not have been a surprise, but I thought they were really holding on to him because he really helped last season. But we spoke to a Mansfield fan on the podcast, and he said that basically they're a better team now because they're not as over-reliant on one person.
Interesting. Right.
So that was and that stood out for me in the game. They were threats from everywhere rather than not this focal point of Keeler Dunn. Honestly, they'll be worth a watch. They played some really good football and they mixed it up. Well, I've got two more questions. Hopefully I'll squeeze in your diary. Wrexham in January, obviously we're a little bit of time off, but January we're probably desperate for a goal scorer to supplement Mullin, with Jack Marriott out injured for 4 months or so, and an alternate for Elliot Lee as a sort of creative midfielder, as a rotation option, or to come in and let Lee be the backup option. Any off the top of your head, any names that you think, oh, that would be quite interesting for Wrexham to look at? I know I've dropped that on you. Perhaps I should have
Sure.
pre-warned you about that one,
No,
but
don't worry. I suppose my question, if I can ask you, what profile of striker do you think you're going to be looking for? Because I've always felt about Wrexham, you could do with a super speedy striker to offer something different to
yeah,
Mullin or different to Ollie Palmer, for instance. But it's always felt to me like Phil Parkinson hasn't wanted to go down that route, and he's wanted the pace to be more in the wide areas. So, do you think you'll be looking for somebody more in the Jack Marriott mould?
yeah. So I mean, if that sort of target man we seem set up for. We've got Ollie Palmer, we've got we call him Iceland, we've got John Daddy Bodvarsson,
Right.
who kind of takes that target role. So I think it'll be an alternate for Mullin to be
Okay.
more of that poacher, to be the actual goal scorer. But we've never really, I don't even think we've never really had any pace there, Gab. Not blistering pace that we know you can have, but it'll definitely be more of that number, that what, I don't know what you want to call it, more of that poacher type of role, a Marriott stroke Mullin
I see.
replacement hybrid, sort of
Yeah.
that type.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. I think in terms of League Two, sorry. I'm just trying to have a look at who there is available, kind of skimming through the team names. I'm not quite sure that I see anyone that I would think could be the sort of Jack Marriott. If I have a quick look at who's there in League One. There's obviously Richard Kone at Wycombe Wanderers,
Yeah,
but Wycombe have got very wealthy owners as well, haven't they? So it's more one of those where if it's a Northampton or a Shrewsbury or a club that's maybe got more limited resources, maybe somebody like Danilo Orsi at Burton Albion. I don't know if you've seen him
yeah.
yet.
He left Crawley, didn't he, at the end in the
Yes.
summer? Yeah.
Yeah. So somebody like that would that be of interest? Do you think somebody like Danilo Orsi?
I mean, it's we're trying to guess out what somebody else is thinking. This is my only question is, I wonder whether they will go upwards and try and look at somebody who's lingering around the mid to bottom of the championship,
Yeah.
who's perhaps at a club that doesn't pay the big bucks, because we know what the championship can be like, don't we?
Sure.
And I just wondered whether that's what they do, because historically, what they've always tried to do is buy from above, so that when you get there, you don't look out of place. If that does that,
Yeah.
I don't know whether there's a better word for it than that. But
I'm
does
sure.
that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yes, that does make sense. So let me have a look at strikers in the championship because I
We
can
tried
see.
just to buy you a bit of time. We were sniffing around Mr. Smith from Sheffield Wednesday, if you remember, for a
Yes.
long time before we got Bodvarsson and before we got Mo Farl, because obviously I don't know whether I would have thought Sheffield Wednesday paid pretty big bucks, to be honest, but
Mm,
that was a name that was really strongly, not just idle paper talk, Gab. It was a real strong link, and you could see that was the kind of level that they were looking at the time.
sure.
Has that helped you?
Yes, it has. I think one player I would be quite interested in would be maybe Jacob Brown at Luton Town. Had a little bit of Premier League experience last season. At the moment, he's behind um, Elijah Adebayo and Carlton Morris, who are two very good Championship strikers. So maybe there's a possibility that Jacob Brown wants more starts,
Yeah,
in which case, there could be a window there for Wrexham. Um, I'd also maybe be looking at somebody like Andre Gray at Plymouth Argyle, another experienced Championship goal scorer. He seems quite similar to the sort of Jack Marriott mould in the sense that they're a bit on the older side, but they've got a kind of goal scoring pedigree.
yeah,
So those would be a couple of suggestions. Maybe Jacob Brown if you're looking for a quick, energetic type that's going to sort of hassle and harry because he's a real athlete, and then somebody like Andre Gray who would be more of a proven goal scorer.
yeah. Love that. Have you got time for an Elliot Lee alternate, or are you
An
running out?
Elliot Lee alternate. looking at the championship, just kind of going to scan through some names now. Have you got
It's
a?
hard when you're underprepared, isn't it? But but
Can you fill the air
I
with
can.
some talking while I have a quick look?
I can. I sort of can. So perhaps, I mean, you know what type of player Elliot Lee is, but
Sure.
this player really obviously needs to be. They've got to be creative. They're going to have to work hard in a Phil Parkinson side, aren't they? Can't be
Mhm.
a lazy number 10, or if you for want of a better word, if there might be a better way of putting that, but. Because Elliot Lee works tremendously hard, but the problem is we run him into the ground, Gab. All last season, we had no alternate for him, so we ran him out every game. And by the time the end of the season come, he was obviously, he was running on fumes. So we rely on it. We rely on him chipping in with goals, but his creativity, ideally, is the key element from that midfield point of view. So I
Yeah.
think that's the kind of the. I don't think the physical profile too much matters. I think it's more about can they deliver those assists, chip in with goals,
Mm.
and the pre-assist. Remember the pre-assist that was famous for about 2 minutes? The pre-assister, aren't they? The dictators, that type of creativity.
Absolutely, yeah. So what I would think is there's a lad called Rocco Vata at Watford who's only started 2 games so far this season. Now I know that typically Wrexham don't tend to like to dip into the loan market because I know Phil Parkinson likes his permanent assets, but Vata does have some very good reviews in the sort of youth football scene,
Yeah,
and he has impressed for Watford when he has featured. But the challenge he's had is that they've also got Georgi Chakvetadze,
yeah.
who's their best player this
Red hot
season, so he
form this season, isn't he?
hasn't been getting it exactly. Yeah, so whether Rocco Vata could be available for for Wrexham. So yeah, Jacob Brown and Rocco Vata would be my
Love
two
it.
suggestions for a January
Love it.
sweep.
I will text Sean Harvey now, and and we will
Brilliant.
see what. Hey, listen, you never know. On the day Ben Foster, I'm sorry, people who follow my podcast know this. On the day Ben Foster retired, I think it was Off the Line. Have you ever heard the Off the Line
Yes, I love Off the Line.
Yeah, so
Yes, it's Jay who
off
does
the
some great
line had
work.
tweeted a kind of who are Wrexham going to sign as an alternative, and on that day that he retired, I wrote I'd love Arthur Okonkwo because I knew he was good at Crewe, and I couldn't believe it 2 weeks later when obviously it manifested itself. So you never know, Gab. You just never know.
Definitely,
We've
absolutely.
got Exeter this week. The final question: we've got Exeter this week. What do you think might happen in that game as a neutral?
Is it home or away?
Home, we're
Okay, yeah, I think he should beat Exeter. I do like Exeter actually.
good
They're a
run,
good
didn't they? They had
side.
a really good run.
Yeah, I think they've recruited very well. They've got a manager I like in Gary Caldwell. They've got a very good head recruitment there called Marcus Flitcroft, who's consistently done some very good work there over the last 10 years or so. So I like Jack McMillan, the right wing back they've got. Ryan Woods is another experienced head in midfield that they've got, but they've also got some talent in there. Joe Whitworth on loan from Crystal Palace, the
The
goalkeeper.
goalkeeper, yeah.
Exactly, yeah, Tristan Kramer. So they've smashed the loan market, but they've also got some experienced heads in there to balance it out. So I think there'll be a challenge. I think if this was at St James's Park, I'd be quite worried for you. But your
Yeah,
record at the racecourse is pretty strong, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. So I'm going to predict. I don't know whether you're big on predictions. I'm going to predict a Wrexham win by a goal on an uncomfortable afternoon. I don't think it'll be. This isn't going to be a walk in the park type of game.
Yeah, okay. I'll go with 2-1 to Wrexham.
Yeah, I'll buy that off you right now. I'll take that. Listen, Gab, I've probably taken up more of your time than you had, so I'll let you go. I really appreciate you catching up with us, and if you feel like it post Christmas or something, can we try and catch up and see where we are there? Can we try and
Perfect. Yeah,
squeeze
I'd love
something
to.
in?
Sounds great. Yeah,
Oh, perfect. I appreciate that, Gab. Thanks ever so much.
no problem.
I'll let you go. Thank you.
See you.
Cheers, mate. Brilliant. There you go. Little bit of a chat. Snow day in Wrexham. So Mr. EFL himself, go and follow on social media at Gab Sutton. Most people will already know. The majority of people who will be here watching this today will be here from Gab's site. So at Gab Sutton and EFL debate on YouTube and Spotify. And for the Wrexham fans that are here who've come, thank you very much. We'll be back later on. I'm slightly later tonight, 7 o'clock, where I think myself, Courtney is around. Actually, I thought I was going to be flying solo, so Courtney's around, and hopefully Wayne from the Turf is meant to be joining us. So hopefully that'll be good. So all right, have a good afternoon, everybody. Thanks.